The bus rattled along the deserted highway, its headlights slicing through the dense fog that had settled over the road. Mark Evans checked his watch, 11:47 p.m. Just 13 more minutes until the last stop. He was one of only 5 passengers left. An old man near the front was nodding off. A young couple whispered to each other near the back, and a woman in a dark coat sat across the aisle from him, staring out the window. Mark had taken this route home from work for months, but something about tonight felt off. The driver had been silent, the usual small talk absent. The air inside the bus was stale, thick with a strange tension. Then, at the next stop, a new passenger stepped on. He was tall, dressed in a black raincoat, his face obscured by the shadows of his hood. He didn't pay the fare, and the driver said nothing. He simply walked down the aisle and took a seat, right behind Mark. A shiver ran down Mark's spine. Something about the man's presence was wrong. Then he heard it, a whisper, "You shouldn't be here." Mark turned his head slightly, his pulse quickening. The man behind him was sitting still, his hands resting on his knees. He wasn't looking at Mark. "Excuse me?" Mark said. Silence. The bus rumbled forward, the fog outside growing thicker. Mark's heart pounded. Had he imagined it? But then, the whisper came again, lower this time. "You need to get off at the next stop, no matter what." Mark's hands tightened around his back. He glanced at the driver, who seemed oblivious. Only the woman in the dark coat seemed to notice. The bus approached the next stop. The sign was barely visible through the fog. A lonely stretch of road, no buildings, no lights, just darkness. The doors hissed open. Mark hesitated. Should he listen to the stranger? Why'd he feel like stepping off was safer? He turned back to question the man, but the seat was empty. Mark's blood ran cold. The man in the raincoat was gone. Panic surged through him. He looked around frantically, but there was nowhere for the man to have gone. The doors had only opened for a second. A soft voice made him freeze. The woman in the dark coat. "You should have listened." The bus jerked forward, the doors shutting with a mechanical hiss. Mark's breath came in short gasps as he turned to the woman. "Who are you?" he demanded. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out something small. A photograph. Mark took it hesitantly. His hands shook as he brought it closer to his eyes. It was a picture of the bus. Tonight's bus. But in the image, the seats were empty. Except for one, his own. "What is this?" Mark whispered. The woman sighed, looking almost sad. "The last stop," she murmured. "No one ever gets off." Mark's chest tightened. He bolted to his feet, stumbling toward the driver. "Stop the bus!" he shouted. "Let me off!" The driver didn't respond. Mark grabbed his shoulder, and the driver's head slumped forward, revealing a deep, jagged wound across his throat. His skin was pale, his eyes wide open in a frozen expression of terror. The bus had been driving itself. Mark stumbled back, ball rising in his throat. The old man was gone. The couple was gone. Only the woman remained, watching him with those dark, unreadable eyes. "What is this?" Mark choked out. The bus rumbled faster, the fog outside growing impossibly thick. The road was gone now. Only swirling mist surrounded them. The woman finally stood. "You should have gotten off when you had the chance," she said softly. Mark ran to the door, pounding on it. "Let me out!" The woman's voice came from right behind him now. "You were never meant to leave." Mark turned. The woman's face was changing, distorting, becoming something inhuman. Her eyes were hollow, her mouth stretching into a grotesque grin. The bus was no longer moving. It was floating, suspended in the fog. Mark screamed as the doors suddenly opened, and the darkness swallowed him whole. The bus pulled into its next stop. A man in a dark raincoat stepped aboard, taking his seat behind a young woman. He leaned forward, whispering in her ear, "You need to get off at the next stop, no matter what."